saw that. Brick killed a guy.
Better Call Saul was the Breaking Bad spin-off show that we didn't know we needed. Several characters had loose ends when Breaking Bad concluded, but Saul Goodman wasn't the first character that came to mind when I wondered about the aftermath of the show. As it turns out, Saul's ending was the true ending of Breaking Bad's story, and his fate put a perfect bow on what's arguably the best television saga ever made. Better Call Saul was both a prequel and a sequel to Breaking Bad. We saw the origin story of characters like Saul, Mike, Gus, and Hector, alongside the aftermath of Breaking Bad and El Camino. More than anything though, the story of Better Call Saul is the story of Jimmy McGill returning to himself after spending years entrenched in alter egos. Saul is only one element of Jimmy's character, and is more of a reflection of how Chuck sees him than his true identity. At several points in the show, we see a near schizophrenic swap between the three personalities living inside one body: Jimmy McGill, Saul Goodman, and Gene Takovic. I'm gonna get into spoilers for the whole series now, so you've been warned.
Hi, I'm Saul Goodman. Did you know that you have rights?
Gene Takovic and Saul Goodman are the Jekyll and Hyde of Jimmy McGill. Gene is a meek, unassuming pushover, everything that Jimmy perceives as a weakness. Saul is a bombastic, confident con man who puts money and status ahead of everything else. He's a harnessing of Jimmy's weaknesses into strengths. Like Tyrion says in Game of Thrones, wear it like armor and it can never be used to hurt you. Saul is Jimmy's armor. We already knew Saul quite well from Breaking Bad, but Better Call Saul recontextualizes the character. The early seasons of the show served as Saul's origin story and his slow takeover of Jimmy McGill. Saul is and always has been a part of Jimmy, but he isn't fully in the driver's seat until after Howard dies and Kim leaves him. Breaking Bad is all Saul, until he goes into hiding. From there, it's the Gene Takovic show, full cowering survival mode. But that doesn't last long as Saul reinserts himself and, inevitably, takes over the Gene character as the dominant personality within Jimmy. We see all three of these characters in the final episode of the show. Gene is terrified, running from the police and making a call to Cinnabon once he's eventually arrested. After his panic attack in the holding cell, Saul reemerges and takes control. Jimmy's laughter during this scene is Saul reinserting himself. Gene's biggest fear is getting caught, but Saul is in his element.
It's showtime, folks!
At this point, Saul is back, and he's getting ready to set himself up for his version of a happy ending. A short 7-year stint in a hand-picked prison as the result of unrivaled manipulation. That is, until the only thing tethering Jimmy to this world reemerges, his love for Kim. When Jimmy learns that Kim turned herself in, he uses Saul as a vehicle to set up Jimmy's ending, which is the ending we eventually get. Jimmy's ending isn't some intricate scheme to avoid getting in trouble. It isn't even truly an effective fall-on-the-sword effort to save Kim. It's the truth, something that Jimmy's been actively avoiding since Howard told him about how and why Chuck died. This transformation is illustrated through the flashbacks during the final episode, entitled Saul Gone. The time machine conversations with Mike and Walt is all Saul. Money is his only priority, and his only regret is a scam that went wrong. Saul might not have regrets, but Jimmy does. And we see that in the final flashback as Chuck picks up a copy of The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. Unlike the previous flashbacks, this one features Jimmy, not Saul, and it shows us Jimmy's answer to Saul's time machine question. If he could go back in time, Jimmy would treat his brother differently. When Howard first tells Jimmy about Chuck's motivation for killing himself, we see Saul interject as an almost immediate reflex to protect Jimmy. It's Saul that lets Howard believe he's responsible, reflected by the immediate shift in Jimmy's behavior. It isn't the news that changes Jimmy's mood, it's the switch to Saul as a defense mechanism. Killing his brother is just too much for Jimmy to handle, so Saul takes over, turning depression into motivation. The same thing can be said about Jimmy's bar hearing. In his first appearance, he's Jimmy, but he's unable to open up and be vulnerable about his brother, which leads to his reinstatement being denied. When he does open up in his appeal, it's revealed that that wasn't actually Jimmy. It was Saul using Jimmy's vulnerability as a manipulation tactic. Of course, everything he said here was true and heartfelt, but he wasn't able to see it that way. At this stage, he was only able to give the board what they needed to hear by filtering his pain through the Saul Goodman persona. But there was one thing that Saul was never able to touch: Jimmy's responsibility for Chuck's death. In Jimmy's monologue at the end of the series, we finally see him process the root of his pain. Saul isn't there to protect him this time. Jimmy's back. The real Jimmy.
But that thing with your brother, that wasn't even a crime.
It was.
Gene, Saul, and Jimmy all have different motivations, and they all compete in the final episode. Gene wants to stay hidden, and Saul wants to get away with it, but Jimmy wants to be loved. The ending is Jimmy's ending, not Saul's or Gene's. He finds his redemption in the only person that matters to him, literally and figuratively returning to how it all began. Jimmy and Kim sharing a cigarette against the wall. As the flame flickers, we see color, showing that, for this brief moment, it's like old times. As Kim looks back at Jimmy from across the yard, we see that Saul is gone, as the name of the episode suggests. It's just Jimmy now, and while that means he'll be spending the rest of his life behind bars, he'll do so as himself, not as an alter ego.
The name's McGill. I'm James McGill.
Jimmy McGill and Walter White are two very different characters. In Breaking Bad, we slowly come to the realization that this brutal, heartless kingpin is who Walter truly is. On the contrary, Saul is something that Jimmy becomes out of necessity. Saul is how Chuck sees Jimmy, and Jimmy uses that to his advantage. But Saul and Jimmy were always two separate people. The lines blurred from time to time, but Jimmy's always been his own person underneath the Saul armor. Better Call Saul is the official end of the Breaking Bad universe, and the best possible ending for Jimmy McGill. He could have cowered forever as Gene, and he could have walked away as Saul. Instead, he decided to face the music as Jimmy, and found inner peace that he was missing for a large portion of his life. Of course, that's just my take. If you had a different interpretation, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.